Kedushim. Kedushim to you is where the parsha begins. You shall be holy, ki kadeshani, because I am holy. Hashem Elokeichem your God. So Kedushim to you. So the simple explanation, both Rashi and Ramban go with this explanation, that Kedushim to you is a tzivoy, it's a commandment. The commandment is you shall become holy. Now, how does one become holy? So Rashi tells us in general, prushim et arayis. You should try to remove yourself from immoral activity. And that's the step towards holiness. I mean, most people, if you ask them, how does one become holy? They probably think of a lot of things, of fasting and praying and all sorts of things, but you never think that prushim et arayis, somehow setting yourself apart from arayis, that's the key. For morality, that's the key for holiness. Nachmanides, Ramban says, it refers to something else. It refers to Kaddish Atzmach Abutulach. The specific commandment is to remove yourself from those areas of life that, technically speaking, are permissible, but there might be temptation to overindulge. Don't even overindulge in those areas that one is permissible. That's even a bigger question, that somehow that holiness is involved with simply not getting involved in stuff that you, in theory, are permitted to make use of, but still, one should not, one should try to stay away from excessive indulgences, even in the area of permissibility. Those are Rashi and Ramban's interpretations, or explanations rather, but they both see this as a commandment. Before we come back to Rashi and Ramban, the others have viewed this not just as a commandment, but really as a prediction. Kedoshim to you means you shall become holy. That Hashem is declaring that the Klal Yisrael's destiny is one of holiness. Kedoshim to you, that you shall become holy. And if it's viewed as one's destiny, or the Jewish people's destiny, it's something we need to understand. And that is that if a person recognizes, or let's say doesn't recognize what they're destined for, if a person doesn't realize what they're wired for, and they don't act accordingly, there's a certain amount of misfiring, there's a certain amount of discomfort. In other words, if I don't know, if you have a car and it has an engine that's supposed to, you put in a certain gear for going downhill and you put a certain gear for going uphill, and you put the wrong gear in for the wrong uphill downhill, so it might go, but it's not a smooth ride, so to speak. So if our neshamas are geared for holiness and destined for holiness, and we take our lives in a different direction, we might still be moving, but we won't feel that smooth ride, that we're going against the flow of what we're naturally supposed to be doing. So Kedoshim to you is God's making us aware that we're destined for holiness. And one should not try to run away from that destiny. Try as we might. The Jews that, individuals have always tried to deny their destiny, deny who they are. And of course, it's like, a person denying that they're a person. I mean, if you want to think you're a chicken, so you can live like a chicken, but you're obviously, right, you're missing life. And not only that, you're putting yourself in a situation that makes no sense for you. So Kedoshim to you means recognize who you are, recognize what you're wired for. Okay. But the simple explanation, both Rashi and Ramban concur that it's a commandment, and you shall become holy is a commandment. And according to Rashi, again, it's remove yourself from the temptation of immorality. And according to Ramban, it's even more removed. It means remove yourself from the excess of life that one might be permissible to indulge in. So let's talk a little bit about those ideas. To understand that holiness is somehow connected with removing yourself from indulgences, immoral and illegal, or even permissible ones. How does that achieve holiness? Like I said, holiness, most of us associate holiness with some otherworldly kind of experience, some esoteric kind of connection, and yet here we're getting really down to something nitty-gritty of, right? So one way of understanding is that really, the Mesilas Yesharim talks about this a bit, that holiness is not something that we can grab onto, but rather we have to prepare ourselves to be able to receive. Let me say it a little differently. If you asked a child to draw a picture of a rocket ship going to the moon, and let's say this child has never seen a rocket ship before, and he knows the moon is, how many miles away is the moon from us?
250,000.
250,000 miles away. So he says, think to himself, that's a lot of gas, right? So he draws a rocket ship. He has a huge, 5-mile block, of gas tanks, right? Because 250,000 miles, it needs a lot of gas to go from here to there. What he doesn't realize is that, no, all you have to do is get yourself out of that gravitational pull. And for that, you need tons of gas to get yourself out of that gravitational. But once you get out of that gravitational pull, you don't need that gasoline anymore. The same thing really with holiness. What Rashi and Ramban are both describing is that as physical beings, there's a gravitational pull to physicality. And all we have to do is, it's a tall order, but if we could get ourselves out of that gravitational pull, which is the overindulgence, which is the immorality, once we're able to break free from that, then holiness is more of a kind of a smooth sailing, so to speak, kind of experience. When Rashi says holiness means remove yourself from the morality, when Ramban says remove yourself from overindulgence, that's a step number one, but that's the most important step. When we pull ourselves out of the gravitational pull of physicality. And once we do that, then we're able to access spirituality and freely move into the spiritual realm, because we're not being pulled back anymore. That's the same kind of idea. That's Kedushim to you. Okay, so let's talk for a moment what that really means. So according to Ramban, it certainly means do not indulge in that which is excessive. For instance, I was used example. Torah says you can't eat pig, but it doesn't say anyway you can't eat like a pig, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't say that, right? But that is what Ramban is referring to. That one should not, even though technically speaking you could, but that would be an overindulgence. What does that mean? So another way of saying it is that in battle there are 3 territories. Territory number 1 is your home territory. Territory number 2 is the enemy territory. And territory number 3 is the battle line. Right? Home territory needs to be maintained. Enemy territory isn't yet conquered. And the battle line, that's where everything takes place. So all of us have in our own lives home territory, enemy territory, and the battle line. Meaning, there's certain things in our lives that we've conquered, like home territory. Like all of us hopefully have conquered the temptation to murder, if we ever had one, right? It's not part of who we are. It's home territory and doesn't need to be conquered. Then there's part of us that, let's call the enemy territory, but not enemy, but territory that's not conquered at all, that's beyond us. The world of living at such a holy spiritual plane that it's kind of beyond us to be able to get up every night and do tikkun chatzos in the middle of the night and do all those prayers. We can't do that. But then there's a battle line, which for each one of us is different, where we engage in trying to move ourselves out of the home territory and into the battle line. Most of us would be comfortable staying in the home territory. It doesn't involve any discomfort. But the challenge in life is prepare yourself to keep moving that battle line, keep pushing into that battle line, and try to conquer more. That's what Ramban is referring to, that even the areas that which is permissible, but if you're able to learn self-control in those areas, that's an idea of pushing the battle further. And understand also, there's a certain strategy to that as well. If a person is able to work on developing a discipline in those areas that are permissible, so then he develops that discipline to apply in the areas which are not permissible. Meaning, if you never exercise that discipline, so then when you're dealing with what's permitted and not permitted, there's a very good likelihood you're going to mess up because you haven't exercised discipline. But in the area of that which is permitted, if you're able to experiment, so to speak, and exercise discipline, you can take that development and that discipline and now apply it to the areas which you really have to be careful not to get involved with. So that territory of which is mutalach, which is permissible to you, is that perfect ground to practice the idea of abstention or discipline, whatever you want to call it, so that you can apply it to those areas where you can't. Because if you don't practice in the areas where you can, you're not going to be able to apply it where you can't either. Okay, that's Kedushim to you on a similar basis. There's a famous medrash that I'm sure we quoted in the past. It's a little perplexing. You shall be holy. And the verse ends, Ki Kadosh Ani, because I am holy. So the medrash tells us like this: you should be holy because I am holy. What does that mean? So medrash says, you shall be holy. Yachol kamoni. You might have thought that you could be as holy as me. The pasuk concludes, Ki Kadosh Ani, no, I'm still holier than you. This is the original holier than thou, right? I am holier than you. God says, don't try to be as holy as me, I'm still holier than you. Which is kind of a really strange thing. What's God trying to tell us? Don't try to be as holy as me. You might think, God says, you human beings might think you could be as holy as me. No, you can't. First of all, is God taunting us? Number two is, why would anybody think they could be as holy as God? Right? It's kind of absurd. You might think that you could be as holy as me. No. I'm still holier than you. So is God trying to stick it to us? I'm still holier than you? No, I don't think so, right? And it's like, why would I even think I could be as holy as God? So let's see what that really means. So it's interesting that this Parashat Kedushim to you, most of the mitzvahs, it contains many mitzvahs in this Parashat. Ruba de Ruba, most of the mitzvahs deal with laws between Adam and Chavero, laws between man and man. Can't take revenge, you should love your neighbors, love yourself, don't speak slander, give people the benefit of the doubt, all these beautiful mitzvahs. It would seem that the Torah is telling us is that holiness is very much connected specifically to laws between man and man. What does that mean? How does one define holiness? So, like I said, we can, define holiness in many ways. The Torah has a very pragmatic definition of holiness. Holiness is the ability to get beyond yourself. When you're not just stuck on yourself, but you're able to transcend yourself, that's holiness. Holiness is an experience of being beyond yourself. So therefore it makes sense. All these laws of Bein Adam Chavero, when you're caring about somebody else, it's no longer about you. These are all exercises in holiness. In fact, Amar Rabbi Kiva, Zek Klal Gadol B'Torah, or actually, V'Haftar Chamecha, Amar Rabbi Kiva, Zek Klal Gadol B'Torah. It says in this Torah portion, you should love your fellow Jews, you love yourself. Zek Klal Gadol B'Torah, this is the great rule of the Torah. And the obvious question is, what did Rabbi Akiva tell us that the verse didn't tell us? The pasuk says, you should love yourself, love your fellow as you love yourself. And Rabbi Akiva says, Zek Klal Gadol B'Torah, this is the great rule of the Torah. Like, what's he telling me that I didn't know? What's he adding with these words, Zeh Klal Gadol B'Torah? This is the great rule of the Torah. He's telling us something very special. He's telling us that the mitzvah of V'Haftar Kamocha is not a regular mitzvah. There are pratim, there are details, there are mitzvahs that are details, and there are mitzvahs that are klolim, there are general rules. He's telling us that this mitzvah is a klal mitzvah, not a prat mitzvah. Like if you have a hotel, every room has its own specific key, but you've got to have a master key as well. V'Haftar Kamocha is a master mitzvah. What does that mean? Well, if the definition of holiness is transcending the self, and every mitzvah in the Torah is a prat, is a detail to get to that holiness, every mitzvah is one specific exercise in training us to get beyond ourselves. V'Haftar Kamocha is not a prat mitzvah, it's a klal mitzvah. Every mitzvah is really trying to get us to that place called V'Haftar Kamocha. It's a klal gadol b'Torah. We keep saying, this is not a prat mitzvah. This mitzvah is this is the goal mitzvah. Every mitzvah that we do, whether it's Shabbos or kosher, in some form or fashion, is an exercise to get us to that place where it could be V'Haftar Kamocha, where you can get beyond yourself. It's a klal mitzvah. Now, here's what might think Yachal Kamoni. If holiness is being selfless, so God says, you might think you'd be as selfless as me. No, you can't be as selfless as me. And God's not taunting us, but He's telling us that God can be totally selfless because He has no self-interest. A human being does have self-interest because he has self-needs. So God warns us, you can't be 1,000% selfless. It's not possible. So you might think you'd be as selfless as me. No, you can't be as holy as me. So where do we go with that? So Hillel actually presents that dilemma. The famous Hillel, we said many times, Im eina ni li mili, if I'm not myself, who will be for me? Which means I have to have a self. Uchshani l'atzi mani, but if I'm only myself, what am I? Means, but I can't only be about myself. So Hillel really is presenting us with this dilemma. On the one hand, I have to take care of myself. Like God says Himself, you can't be selfless totally. Hillel says, yes, I have a self. On the other hand, says Hillel, Uchshani la'atzmi, but if I'm only about myself, what am I? So Hillel's presenting us this dilemma, this challenge, this balancing act between taking care of the self and getting beyond yourself. And I've always pointed out that Pirkei Avos is not a philosophy book. Philosophy can end with questions. You can ponder and ponder and ponder. You don't have to come up with an answer, right? You can ponder away. Pirkei Avos is an ethics book. It teaches you how to live, what to do and what not to do. Hillel over here seems to be pondering in some philosophical dilemma with no solution. He says, on the one hand, I have to take care of myself. On the other hand, it can only be about me. Okay, so what's the solution? Hillel offers no solution. That's philosophy. He's saying, what's man? Is man about the self? Yeah, I think so. Is man only about the self? I think not. Okay, great. So that's a great philosophical debate. But where's the solution? Where's the ethical application? Yeah, it's going to answer the question first. Where's the ethical application? If you look in the Pirkei Avos itself, if you study it very closely, you'll see the answer. Hillel's not leaving us, with a cliffhanger with the question. He's giving us an answer. What is the answer based on? It's how we understand what the self is. How do you define self? So what do you mean? Self means me. Well, maybe. But self could also mean when you get married, your wife is part of you. And when you have children, they also become an extension of you. And if you could extend further, where somebody else becomes part of you, which means I care about them. Their pain is my pain. You love them as much as you love yourself. That means you've extended yourself in somebody else. That you really feel about him like it's you, right? So here's the way to kind of balance both. It's not, kind of the schizophrenic Jekyll and Hyde. I have to be self, and sometimes jump and be not about myself. I'm myself sometimes, I'm not myself sometimes. I'm about myself, I'm being selfless. Selfish, selfless, selfish. No, you're not jumping back and forth. The trick is to expand your definition of self to include others in who you are. So now, you're both. You're taking care of yourself, and you're taking care of others because they are part of who you are. So you expanded your sense of self. Myself now includes others are part of my life. They're part of my orbit. They're part of me. So it's no longer this tension between self and others. Others become part of the self. And that's what Hillel is saying. Im einani li mili. For myself, uchsha'ani la'atzmi. When the I is only me, ma'oni, what is the I worth? He's giving a solution. He's saying, uchsha'ani la'atzmi. When the I, if I define I as me, myself, and I, if the I is only me, if I haven't incorporated others in me, ma'oni, what is my I worth? So Hillel is giving me a solution. He's saying the solution is expand your I to include others. But uchshani la'atzmi, when the I is only myself, then what am I? What is the I? So here, Kedoshim, you shall be holy. And holiness, the entire parsha is about extending beyond self, caring about others. We can't be as selfless as God says, but then how do we resolve the issue? If God says be selfless, have a sense of self, but include others in who you are. And that's how you expand yourself, and that's how you become selfless and have a self at the same time. That's the solution. That's Kedoshim to you. That's what God's saying. You can't be like me, totally selfless. But the next step is to have a self, but expand the self at all times. Others become part of who you are. Yeah, you gotta.
To me, the Haftorah that we read on Shabbat Devarim, right before Tisha B'Av, it gives the same message in a very vivid way.
What do you mean? The what?
The Haftorah that we read the Shabbos before Tisha B'Av.
Yeah.
The Haftorah for Devarim. To me, it gives the same message in a very vivid way.
Okay, very good. All right, excellent. But that's the message, though. That's okay, very good. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about in the parasha is klayim. There's a prohibition in the Torah to plant. You can't take two seeds and mix them together. Somebody just asked me, my students asked me today, not today, a few days ago, now we're getting into uncharted waters with, can you order your baby to have blue eyes? Can you order your baby to be 2 inches, taller? There's ways now they think they can access those genes and do that. And the question is, what does the Torah say about that? Now, it's obviously a huge conversation, and I don't want to directly deal with that now, but the Ramban and this parasha of Klayim kind of becomes one of the foundational pieces. When the Ramban tells us that, this idea of not mixing two species is God's way of telling you, don't mess with nature, in a certain sense. All right, I'm giving a too general, but that concept is what the Ramban...
Separation of Mary, as you call it.
Yeah? Okay. And the truth of the matter is, in the beginning of Bereshit also, the Torah keeps saying over again, after each creation, God created it, liminehu, for its own species. Liminehu. Right? God, we see, look at the world. God did not create elephants to mate with giraffes. Right? Liminehu. Everything was given its own species to maintain its species. So these seem to be the foundational pieces of don't really mess with nature. Now, of course, There are exceptions when there's health issues involved, etc., etc. I'm not really getting that fully. But there's another lesson about kalayim, which I think is extremely valuable and extremely important. And that is, the word kalayim, Unkla says, is arvuvia. Arvuvia means a mixture. Okay, because you're mixing two seeds. If you go to Israel, there's something called a Beit Kela. A Beit Kela is a prison. Now, what's the connection between a Kela, a prison, and arvuvia, and a mixture, and kalayim? What's the connection? The Torah is telling us an incredibly insightful and important concept. Kalayim, one of the telltale symptoms of kalayim is that it can't reproduce. You take a horse and a donkey, get a mule, but the mule is not fertile, it can't reproduce. The lesson behind this is a much deeper lesson, and that is a person we know can only have a sense of continuity and be productive if they're rooted in something. Otherwise, then eventually they wear down. The physical world in general, right, is constantly in a state of entropy. It's wearing down. There's nothing replenishing it. If I have a pitcher of water and I pour the water, eventually I'm going to run out of water because the pitcher is self-contained amount of water. But if this pitcher was connected to a hose, and the hose was connected to the ocean, I mean, obviously the ocean is also somewhat limited, but it goes on. You keep drawing from a source that's an ever non-ending source. That's in theory, certainly anyway. So when I'm connected to a source, I'm able to keep reproducing. If I'm not connected to a source, there's a finite amount of power that I have. But here's the point. You only connect to a source when you connect to one source. A shoresh, a person can and should only have one shoresh, one root. You can't be rooted in two things. Being rooted in two things is not having any roots whatsoever. Kalayim are taking two seeds and trying to get two different roots. It won't reproduce. Because Hashem is telling us that a person has to find himself. Who am I? What am I rooted in? And I can't be equally rooted in both. I could have many branches. I could be rooted in one thing and branch out to many areas. But a person has to find themselves at being rooted in one thing. I can't be. Kalayim is a Beit Kela. It means a prison because I'm locked in. If there's a mixture of two different roots, then it's locked in. It can't reproduce because roots have to be, by definition, is defined by one particular identity. Two identities, two roots with two identities together are no roots. That's what the Torah teaches, that claim a human being also has to find himself rooted in one thing. One more mitzvah, interesting enough, and that's the mitzvah of Orla. Torah tells us that for the first 3 years that you plant a tree, you can't benefit from its fruit. So there's an obvious question that the Mishnah tackles, which is, what happens if you take this tree and you pull it out of the ground and you plant it elsewhere? Does the clock start ticking all over again? Do you have to wait another 3 years for the fruit or not? In other words, you already have a tree. This tree is 5 years old. And so in the past 2 years you've been able to benefit. Then you decide one day, I'm taking this tree, I'm moving it elsewhere, and I replant it. Does that start the clock over again? And now you have to start, in other words, it's considered to be a new tree, and you have to start over again or not? So the Mishnah says, it depends. Very simple. The Mishnah says it depends. If you pull out that tree, if you're just pulling it out by its roots, and that's it, and when you plant someplace else, it's considered to be a new sapling, a new planting, start over again. If, however, when you pull it out with a ball of soil with it, which is what you're supposed to do. When you buy a tree, a bush from Home Depot, right, it comes with a sack of soil, right? If you take a sack of soil with it, then wherever you plant it, it's still in its original soil. It's considered, therefore, to be its own planting. It's the same plantings before, and therefore there's no need to start over again. You with me so far? Okay. So that's the halacha of Orla. But how does it apply to philosophy, to life, as every Jewish law is? It's, again, the same idea. A Jew finds himself planted in one place, then gullus, another place, gullus, another place. And the truth of the matter is, just like the botanist will tell you, the reason why you take the soil with the plant is because if you just take the tree itself and put it in foreign soil, it shocks the plant. I'm not familiar with this territory soil, and it dies, it shocks it. So as the botanists say, take a whole bowl of soil with it. Well, the Jew also, go from soil to soil, it's a new territory, it can be shocking to the system. But the reason why a Jew survives and even thrives is because wherever a Jew goes, he takes that bowl of soil with him. What does that mean? You take Shabbos wherever you go. You take kosher wherever you go. You take learning wherever you go. You're never planting yourself down in new roots in the system. The Jew has the ability to recreate the exact same soil wherever he is. And so he's always being nurtured from that same soil, or that same Torah, the same mitzvah, the same Shabbos. And therefore it's not considered to be a shock to the system. The Jew has the ability to take his environment wherever he goes, so to speak. And that's really the secret of the Jew's survival, and that's the other lesson as well. There are many mitzvahs here that we're not going to touch upon. One is the mitzvah of giving rebuke, which is a very challenging mitzvah, and how to do it in a productive way. One is the mitzvah of not speaking slander, certainly, which is challenging as well. We talked about slander when we talked about saras a few weeks ago. We talked about that slander is usually a very warped sense of self, where you are putting people down because on some level you feel all the attention is due to you, and that if somebody else is taking attention or fame from you, that really belongs to you. And we talked about Lashon Hara being sadly a kind of a warped sense of self. What I want to talk about is just a little bit of Pirkei Avos as well, and that is I started learning.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
When you read about the idea of Kedushim, God says, be holy like me. Then it starts by 3 commandments that God doesn't do. God doesn't have parents.
Sorry.
The only thing is,
yeah.
and he keeps Shabbat the way we know it, and
Right.
of course he doesn't worship any Elilim. So these are only.
Yeah, why these the first 3?
Yeah, these are the first 3, because they don't apply. If you would try to emulate the God, so to speak, why start from these that God is not acceptable?
Well, I would. Well, I would say. Well, I don't know. That's the case. First of all, one way of emulating God has to happen only when we have role models like parents. Fear of a parent, respect of a parent, is supposed to translate into fear of Hashem. So the step number 1 of really being able to emulate God is to first have that the respect of Hashem that you want to emulate Him, and that has to do with the fearing your parents. Keeping Shabbos certainly is the way we know that we bring Kedusha into our lives. It's the first way to bring Kedusha in our lives is through Shabbos. And I would assume staying away from Avodah Zarah means staying away from... Avodah Zarah is always self-serving. Mm-hmm. All Avodah Zarah really is kind of worshiping yourself, and you're just creating gods to worship yourself. But it's certainly a great question. It certainly would require further examination. It's certainly a great question. All right, but so Kedushim to you is the modus operandi, and we talked about kind of getting out of that gravitational pull. There's one more thing I want to tell you about that, and I just forget now. Okay. It's going to come back to me. Okay, let's do a little Pirkei Avos for a second, a little bit, and let's start with the third pair, because we're still up to. We're going to the third pair, because that's the third pair, that's what we're up to.
This week is the 3rd pair.
Right, so let's do the 3rd pair. I know third pair. 3rd pair. So if you take a look, let's do. It was 3rd pair this week. So let's do page 602, 603. You got it?
Mm-hmm.
In the Siddur?
In the Siddur, right here, 602, 603. Because we're learning Pirkei Avos there during between, Pesach and Shavuos. All right. And we got one. Akavia ben Mahalal Omer. Akavia, the son of Mahalal, says, Histakel b'shleish dvarim. Consider 3 things. Ve'inat abal de'ver, you won't come to sin. Damei and basa, know where you came from. U'onat ha'olach, where you going? Ufnei mi at osam dim v'cheshben, before whom you're going to give a reckoning. Ma'ay and basa, where you come from? Mitipus rucha, a smelly seed. U'onat ha'olach, where you going? L'makam for bima salad, you're going to a place of maggots and dust and worms. Ufnei mi at osam v'cheshben, and who are you going to give the final reckoning to? Say melech ma'achem lachem, before God, HaKadosh Baruch. Okay. So, anybody have any questions about this? Let's do this again. Kabbalah says, consider these 3 things, and you won't come to sin. Know where you come from, where you're going, who you're giving a reckoning to, where do you come from, a smelly seed, where you're going to, dust, maggots, and worms, and before you give a calculation for Hashem. Any questions? No? Okay, I got a couple of questions. Number 1.
We'll try to help you out with
Okay, thank you. Histakel. Now the English is consider. That's not really the true definition. What does histakel mean? Anybody know what histakel means?
Watch.
No. Histakel means to look or to gaze. Gaze or look about these three things. So it translates to English because gazing doesn't seem to really work over here. But histakel means to look. Histakel, look at these three things, and you won't come to sin. And what are they? Where you come from, where you're going, and where you're heading. Are we going to give a calculation, a dim right? So first of all, I think most of us here can count to three. Is that fair to say?
Mhm.
So I don't need the Mishnah to teach it to us, right? It's like stakel, right? Look at these things, and you won't sin. You don't have to say the number three. I can count myself and figure out the number three, right? And thirdly, there seems to be some repetitiveness in the Mishnah. It says, look at these three things and you won't come to sin. Where you coming, where you going, and before whom you're going to be calculating. And then it starts over again. Where you coming from and smelling sin. Where you going to, dust and maggots. And right? So why repeat yourself? Why not just do it the first time around? Know where you're coming from, smelly seed. Know where you, right? You notice how it repeats itself twice? It says, it starts out, know three things, or gaze at three things, and you won't sin. Where you're coming from, where you're going, and where you're going to give a reckoning to, and then it starts over again. Where do you come from, a smelly seed? Right? Why do that? Ever see that now? It's bow-legged, it's sticking out here, right? It's really... Robert, why didn't you catch that before, Robert? I asked you how many problems. You go, no problems. You didn't catch that one, right? You see how it's extra?
Well, once before you said you first ask a question so to create a vacuum and then you try to answer it. Maybe this is...
Okay, I like that. I like that. Very good. I like that. I like that. Very nice. First of all, it's interesting, by the way. It doesn't say a person should look at three things. It says you should look at three things. Right? It doesn't say, right? A teaching say a person should do this. Here it says you should. You know why it says you? How many times?
Makes it more personal, more direct.
More personal, more direct, and even more than that. A rabbi will tell you this all the time. A rabbi can, it's a famous story about a rabbi. He gave a very powerful drasha about, a person really trying to improve himself. And a few people came and said, Rabbi, that was such an important drasha, because so many people there needed to hear about it, right?
Yes, right.
Not me, but so, right? And then there was one great holy Jew in the audience, who was much holier than the rabbi himself. And he came and said, thank you so much. I needed that sermon so badly, right? So he took it to heart. Everybody said, oh, that was a great sermon, because that guy needed to hear it. That guy needed to hear it, right? So here also, I'm talking to you. Right? Don't say, everybody, he should think about three things. No, you should think about three things. Because we have this tendency to say, oh, it's a very great lesson. This guy needs it. I don't. No, I'm talking to you. Okay. Let's do, why stakel? Why gaze at three things? See here, the truth of the matter is, as human beings, we experience, and not experience, we understand through all our five senses. It's not just the intellect, because the intellect is quite abstract. What has an impact on us is when we engage all our senses in an experience that is far more impactful than simply knowing something. When God told Moshe, Sinai, your Jews messing up royally with the golden calf, he didn't break the luchos then. He came down, he saw, he broke it. Because when he saw it, it was a whole different experience than simply knowing it. All right? So we understand that we understand things through all our senses and all our experiences. Abstract doesn't have the same impact. Something abstract, it's cold logic, doesn't really necessarily impact us. And so God gave us a tremendous tool to be able to take something abstract and make it real. It's called the power of imagination. Histakel means look, gaze, imagine. Right? You just say look at a smelly seed. You're not looking at a seed, right?
Also, Rabbi, means look with one specific purpose, not generally. Would that mean
Okay,
something?
maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, focusing, like focus.
Yeah, focus, yeah.
Okay, maybe. It's an interesting idea. That's interesting. I didn't think about that. Interesting idea. But understand that God gave us the power of imagination so that we can take the abstract and make it real. On Rosh Hashanah, when we invoke the zchut, the merit of the Akedah, visualize the Akedah. Visualize Avraham about to sacrifice Yitzchak, and you realize what an impactful, dedicated sacrifice that was. When you visualize it, it has much more of an impact than just simply in your mind, playing it through your mind. That's the power of visualization. It makes things more real, it makes it more impactful. Imagination is a double-edged sword. When you cross the line, you walk into the area called fantasy. So imagination goes to fantasy. That's dangerous. Because fantasy is totally self-serving and delusional. Imagination is a tool that you use, but fantasy is when you start believing that to the point where it becomes self-serving. It's like, I know a rabbi once said, I don't have a problem with a guy imagining that one day he's going to be that he's a very wealthy landowner and he owns tons of condominiums. My problem is when he starts knocking on people's doors, start collecting rent, right? Right? That's a problem. That's why you step into fantasy. Fantasy is when you don't know what's real, it's not real anymore. In fact, the first experience with fantasy came from the Nachash, the snake, who the Sephora calls the Koach HaDimyon, the power of fantasy. And what did he tell Adam? Will you eat from this tree? You're going to be like God. Fantasy! He brought him into his fantasy. That's dangerous. Imagination, healthy. Fantasy, not healthy. In fact, I know somebody once asked Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, it was interesting, how long, all these fairy tale books. So they're kind of, if you think about them, not the ones that are like, violent, just all the different he said, really, is that like a total way that we should be reading your kids, fairy tales he said, yes, it's great for kids to develop their imagination. It's important to develop their imagination. Imagination is a great tool that we need to use. So Stockel, use your imagination. Think about that smelly seed. Not just think it, visualize it. Visualize the earth, the worms that you can head to. Right? It's a very humbling thing. Visualize it. Okay. So now we got why, but why 3?